Hi, Gandhi.
Ah,
Thank you.
yes, right.
Hello. How are you today?
All good, thank you. How about you?
Good, good, good. So, thank you so much for accepting to have this recorded conversation with me. I'm very excited to have you on, and also you're my very first interviewee, shall we say, or conversation that's outside of the UK. So, I'm incredibly excited about getting some new perspectives. So, before we go any further, maybe you can give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself, your background, and what you do at the moment in your journey into getting into your current position.
Well, I studied civil engineering too long to remember now, 25 years ago. So I've got about 25 years of experience. I did my engineering in London. Um, and, after 5 years of designing bridge structures and various different infrastructure, I felt that something was missing. And, uh, and so I went and did a degree, a master's in computing. And that gave me a bit more context of how to use some of the engineering data that I felt that was not utilized in the way that I felt that was not in terms of when they do the initial surveys and then when they did the initial business case, some of the data was missed out. So when I did the masters in computing, gave me a better understanding. And then 10 years later, I even decided to go do an MBA simply because I wanted to connect the data, the engineering to more investment or finance thinking. So it sort of has stayed a good part of my career, but civil engineering on the whole is about problem solving, right? And whether you're connecting communities, whether you're building a footpath or maintaining existing infrastructure. Um, and in many cases, what you're trying to do is anticipate and provide a solution to a problem. And to do that means you need to have the right type of data. So for example, if you're building a bridge structure, how wide, how many lanes you want to put it, and what sort of structural information you need to make sure that the bridge will last 120 years. So all that relies on very accurate data. You certainly don't want to build a bridge that's going to last you 80 years. When you look at Hammersmith Bridge, they had, it's 1885 and it's lasted till thus far, although it's having some issues now. But what I used to have in paper over time has now become from paper used to Excel. And now, I can collect data in 3D, ground terrain models, um, juxtapose that with utilities that are all in 3D, underground formation, and I can use that data to help me make better decisions and ensure that clients get better value, that the right level of investment goes into those projects. So that somewhat, is sort of, what I do now is really using a lot of data to make better decisions and inform clients of what steps they need to do next.
Oh, wow. So you've said quite a few things there. It's very exciting, right? I find engineering fascinating, especially things like, structural and bridges, just in general. But the thing that strikes me is that it's so natural for you to talk about it as part of the way that you do deliver your projects, right? Or you do your job.
Mhm.
But it also strikes me about the kind of life and death implications ultimately of the work that
Right.
you're doing, right? If you
Yes.
miscalculate the
Hmm.
impact of poor quality data or misrepresentation of data or miscalculation is quite significant, right? Um,
It it is, and you can see many evidences of that. Engineering, even recently. The miscalculation of the bridge, existing bridge, although it's existing structure, the lack of having good data and lack of maintenance resulted in the bridge collapsing and number of people losing their lives, right? And so that's again because the correct data was collected, but probably not analyzed the way it should have been analyzed. And then the structure should have been maintained in that way. And various other examples at the same time points towards the fact that it's engineers have got a responsibility to make sure that then the data is checked, it's meaningful, and then peer reviewed. So there's a process that you have to follow on to make sure that what you are putting out there protects the public, provides the right environment for people to use it safely. So ultimate goal as engineers is making sure that what we do out there is safe and that it's provides the right benefits to the communities that use it.
So that's quite shocking, to be honest with you, what you've just articulated, but it shows the severity or the real impact of data in real world. But what it also makes me wonder about is within that environment, there's not only, it sounds like, some very clear processes and structure that engineers follow in order to maintain the quality of their data and analyze it in a particular way. But can you talk to me a little bit about some of the, let's say, the environment around that process, right? So how are engineers or engineering teams supported to ensure that they have the right quality data? Is it a case of, everyone from the top to top down is understands the need for quality data? Is it a case of funding availability? Is it a focus on business process or technology? Can you, or maybe you're going to say to me, it's all of the above and then some. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really important for organizations that don't have that, kind of life critical impact, could learn about how they could structure their data practices, because it could improve their operations and the health of their balance sheet ultimately, right? Rather than losing out.
Yeah. So one you mentioned, some of it is all of above the one you mentioned, but traditionally it used to be driven top down, and instructions given, and engineers go quickly do calculations, and then let's go deliver, right? But things have changed. Modern times with the amount of data that we are getting now has resulted in us approaching, well, our engineering on the whole approaching problems differently. From the perspective of what I do, particularly with the sort of sets of clients that I'm working with, I approach it more from a systems thinking approach, where we're just not considering one part, but we're considering the holistic issue of a problem that we're trying to solve, and look at the interdependencies, look at all the sets of data that relates to that problem, look at what outcomes we are trying to achieve ultimately. So, and therefore, how does that mean better relationships, better decision making, and that leading to better business case? So it starts right from the business case point itself, thinking holistically, thinking at all these little interdependencies in between different parties, making sure that everybody's got a common goal understanding. So it requires not only just top down, but it's also bottom up now. So, and when you have the digital environment now, you can run various different scenarios. So with systems thinking, what we do is we run multiple scenarios of different effects coming from different sort of sources, and we can test it out in a digital twin, in a different virtual environment, and see what is going to deliver the best outcome and the benefits for that project and for the client. And you can also then take this and say, if you've invested in this and the investment, how is that then going to provide those benefits for the investment, returns for the society, the non-tangible benefits, but also, we've got to be honest about these returns to the investors. As such, when will they have the right returns and how will that be returned to them? And then achieving their right outcomes is part of it.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. So with that, you've talked a little bit about systems thinking, but also about some of the new technologies that have kind of come to be really important in your domain recently. And you talk about digital twins and I assume IoT. So there's really two things that I'm really interested in exploring with you now. Is the first is um, kind of watching as that digitization enter into your industry. Um, how have you seen that evolve kind of your day-to-day practices? Can you talk a little bit about some of the like the benefits, I suppose, that you've seen? But with that, I like to temper it with some of the challenges as well of this digitization and a move for more traditional practices.
Yeah, so we started, I guess, as I mentioned before, using Excel to uh, gather the data, look at the data, try to juxtapose with uh, various different sheets at one point in time, and then losing a variety of different data, which then slowly moved towards like 2D AutoCAD, the sort of AutoCAD environment where you can see everything linear. Was fantastic to see that you can see the 2D data and then bring in various different information from different agencies, whether it's topographical survey, where the river is, whether it's environmental sort of data, bringing that into a 2D environment, and that you know evolved and became extremely powerful as such, and then you can do some iterations as part of it. So that was a precursor to what was to come next as the computing technology evolved and you started getting the likes of 3D AutoCAD, which then, of course, formalized towards building information modeling. Suddenly, you have that sort of 3D environment where you cannot just look at doing pretty drawings at one point, but then suddenly you can start testing scenarios. What if? And what if I did this? And then when the building information modeling combined with the likes of design softwares and you have this integration, suddenly you can do more than what ifs of just looking at environment. You can also do what ifs if I change materials, if I change uh, different space requirements, what does that do to the design? And this is where design engineers then test out this sort of scenarios. So in the building information modeling, when it's fully utilized, what they call end-to-end, up to LOD sort of 400 type or level of detail 400 type. And then this is now, of course, changed quite dramatically when you start talking about digital twin, because that's digital twin should not be confused with building information modeling. You rightly said digital twin. You're actually testing a environment that is dynamic. So you're talking about using sensors, data from sensors, for industrial, for IR, ultimately, using IoT devices and testing it in the sort of how to mimic real world scenarios is where we are now at this point. And so of course, the better computing power, we can test out more and more scenarios. But the challenge for this is the amount of data that it's crunching and the amount of data that we can process ourselves and take in and understand it. So what we are doing next, of course, is mixing this up with machine learning and AI into it and looking at patterns of what's happening in real world scenarios and trying to mimic it into the virtual world. So it's a continuous evolution, but it's not so easy because some of this needs to be explained to the investors, to the board level, and that's where there's this sort of disconnect as such ability to transfer that data and the outcomes to an understandable level to a board or to the investors, because it's not the pictures they want to see, but it's the outcomes they want to see, and how does this translate towards better value for money? Let's say for government clients, how does this translate towards better community service? So we are at that point of I would say, where we are facing that challenge, and how do we translate this information better to to the stakeholders.
Mm.
So that's a challenge that it's a good challenge to have, and it'll be managed as things progress.
Yeah, I suppose it's a part of the challenge is the newness of this
Mm,
technology. Right? I think there are certainly some industries that have been able to capitalize on this type of technology for many years, and so they've gone through that that pain of being able to articulate what the value is or what the benefits are, and demonstrate it with realized value. The challenge is always at that beginning phase where you know that there is value, but you're trying to articulate it with a little bit of trust, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
sorry.
mean, just to say, the thing that is creating a lot of uncertainty now, of course, is the likes of climate change effects into these sort of models, and then how does this inform future decision making, and what do we need to do now to make those changes? And that uncertainty is provides the likes of engineers, what decisions do you make, and that what we spoke earlier about, that liability of making sure that your design is robust enough, but at the right value. And that this is the next, I would say, the next step as in progress that needs to be done, and articulate those benefits.
I think that the climate change conversation is a really interesting one, right? And I probably didn't take that into consideration, although I should have in relation to what you do. But in a way, you could argue that technology is important as part of that because you're able to do that real-time modeling,
Mm.
right? As you learn more about what's happening in the climate, it's almost like you only know as much as you know. I appreciate there's many incredibly smart people that are doing a lot of modeling into the end of the earth, but
Mm.
the reality is that it's an evolving situation and we're constantly learning in a way. So it's a bit of a challenge. So on that note, I'm going to take a slightly different avenue. I know the climate change one is a bit of a dark hole that we can spiral into. But I wanted to take a slightly different approach and ask you about open data and data sharing. Now, this is a topic that I feel has becoming, gained some speed and strength over probably in the last year or so. A lot more people are talking about it. Um, and in terms of what the type of work that you do in infrastructure projects, I guess I'm wondering whether that is an area that has now touched you guys, and if so, or even if not, what's your perspective on increased and more open sharing of data?
Well, there are certainly there are some data that can and should be shared. I think particularly sharing between agencies, and sharing between different stakeholders, are acquiring those data. But uh, I think it's still new somewhat in open data, in the sense that, assuming that, let's say, we have various rich structures, or various different infrastructure that has sensitive information in there, you do not want that to fall to the wrong hands as such. So, or you do not want to know, because if you were to provide certain amount of data, then it'll be probed, and there are people who are clever, very clever, in probing why is that data not provided for a certain part of, let's say, a building. What's going on in that building? Yeah. So it's sometimes quite difficult for engineers uh, to share some of this data. It's not just engineers as such, but technologies as well, that feel that if those data was put out in the open, then what's the impact on security? Uh, and should that data that's been acquired by hardened, well-meaning people, should that be shared? So there's going to be this sort of, I guess, debate about how much data can we share, and what's meaningful data should be shared, and then how it can be beneficial to the various different parties who are interested in the data. So obviously a platform probably can be created, I imagine, to share this open data for different type of information that can be acquired. For argument's sake, utilities, you know, it's so difficult to get data from them to know exactly where what is going on. But I can understand why they want to protect certain amount of data, because there's certain information and certain types of utilities that are got to be protected. But if there's a platform that could be shared that remains protected, but benefits the various different people who are working on certain infrastructure project, then that could be a platform that then could be utilized to ensure that data is protected, and that data will not be shared beyond that. So there's a security built in that data could not pass beyond a certain gate. So I myself have not really faced too much of question from open data and sharing data so far, and clients have been more protective than actually wanting to give out data. So we have to respect the client's wishes in this case.
Yeah, no, of course. I guess, I mean, part of the reason why I asked this question is obviously many cities, many governments have got their own open data capabilities, but it is quite limited, right? And the question then
Yes.
becomes, to your point, is how much can we extend or expand this data set by, and what is useful? And obviously with that, security becomes, to your point, a really complex but crucial element. So we met during a smart city mission to Malaysia, or Kuala Lumpur specifically. Right. And so far, I have not heard you mention smart building, smart bridges, smart bridges in particular. I mean, we all know about smart cities, smart buildings, but are smart bridges a thing nowadays?
Oh, absolutely. There are smart bridges. Oh, you wouldn't believe so there's several major bridge structures, particularly one in Hong Kong, Stonecutter Bridge, it's called. It's got about 10,000 sensors on the bridge from measuring, because Hong Kong is subject to typhoon. It's in a marine environment. So we got sensors on the cable stayed structure that measures wind speed, how much of marine sort of salt that may be depositing on certain parts of the cable during certain periods, and how does the bridge then behave during typhoons, how much traffic is going in there, what's happening with the surface of the bridge, what's happening with the bridge structure itself, wave effect on the piers. All of this is measured.
Wow.
And it's automated. It's all wired. So there's a command and control center for that bridge that informs what's happening at rail time on the bridge. So if there's something that is not right, then there are, I know you don't like dashboards, but there are dashboards that sort of points towards what's going on. So there are rail time information that are being analyzed. So we've got a set of formulas that we've developed over time that makes perfect sense for our bridge engineers, and then they know what actions need to be taken. And at the same time, some inspection data that's done physically then is fed into that sort of data pool, and the set of rules that's already created. So then that just creates iteration that makes this bridge really, really smart.
I mean, that's pretty impressive, right? And it makes me think of things like flood detection as important, let's say, benefit out of that, and securing human life. But just in terms of thank you for sharing. But going back to the smart city conversation, what's your perspective on smart cities as a whole? I tend to hear, I'll just be open about this. I tend to hear about individual technologies that are being implemented in order, as part of a smart city strategy. But But I guess what I'm really interested in hearing about is sort of your view in terms of the experience that a smart city can create, but also are we missing a trick here? Is there an integration play across these individual smart city components or smart technologies or smart infrastructure, I suppose, that live separately?
Mm.
Am I kind of going down the wrong path? Is it all operable? If I can say that again, is it all interoperable? Is it all integrated? Or, are you seeing this trend that's heading down that direction? Or is it just easier to build or implement individual technologies to start off with?
When I think about smart cities or smart environment, the sort of first thing that comes to my mind is Jetsons, the
Oh, yes,
cartoon Jetsons, right?
I
It
remember
was,
that.
and that is smart. The way you could say cities in the sky, vehicles flying. It's sort of utopia of smart city when you look at smart city sort of pictures. So it reminds me of Jetsons, and then I think of also Blade Runner and the fact that how that sort of evolved as well. So uh, look, smart cities are a range of technologies, a range of IoT, mobile solutions, big data, AI, if you want to say, now with blockchain. So it's all a part of smart cities. Part of it creates this connected environment. But I think we are taking a block at a time at this moment. So I can give you one example. What we did in a building in KL is we took a block of, a certain number of blocks or buildings, and we censored the buildings, particularly just started with the lift. And we analyzed the lift patterns and the energy usage of the lift. And then we understood when people came in the morning and what levels they went to. So, and what sort of energy usage was required. So we simply used the machine learning algorithm into it. And we said, okay, in the morning, this is how it's going to work. This is where the lift is going to be positioned. And this lift is going to work at this level. So the machine learning started taking over the lift commands itself and positioning the lift in the mornings at this for a certain group of people who wants to go to certain floor because it understood the patterns. What it did though is we looked at the energy demands for that, and then we're able to look at how to reduce the energy demand on this lift for various different blocks because different heights of buildings. And then we were able to sort of level up the energy demand on those buildings using this machine learning system. So that's just sort of one example, but let's assume that you can embed this system, this sort of systems thinking into various different buildings that can look at problems down what's happening down the street. If an accident happen, can it inform automatically? Does it clear traffic lights to get the ambulance quickly? Does it tell you there are free parking spaces in this building now self real time? So this is creating that sort of connected environment. It's, I would say, it's there. It's at the tip of what it can do. There's a lot more can be done. I'm sure that'll start happening when the 5G really rolls on and the amount of data that then be crunching at speeds that is going to be unimaginable and providing uh, quick decisions. But I'm not sure if we are ready or sufficiently have the understanding yet to, there's a lot of plans. There's so many plans, but the limitations in infrastructure, the constraints in what's happening on ground, and I'd say the biggest challenge is probably going to be the energy demand that we need to manage as part of putting all this smart city infrastructure in place. I don't think we're quite there yet. We are still grappling with the fact that we are reducing fossil fuel energy out and trying to put renewable energy, solar powers and wind and so on. So how will that be impacted if we start thinking about smart cities that probably will demand more energy requirements?
Mm.
So
Um,
yeah.
Energy is a big one, right? Because
Mm,
it seems like we we keep trying to figure out what the best source of energy for us is, and ultimately, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, wasn't Greta Thunberg? She was protesting against wind farms, which I had thought were, pretty sustainable in their nature, but it just seems as though there's everything that we touch is still kind of needs a little bit more thought, right? Apart from hydrogen, which everyone's talking about nowadays, and that's really exciting, but we're a little bit far away from it. So you also mentioned connectivity. So 5G, I think it's imminent for some countries or some locations, but not for all. I'm pretty sure that's a problematic one as well, due to the speed of data collection, data transfer, etc. However, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I know that that's causing delay in our speed of progress. But is that really a bad thing? And I ask that because I think, us as human beings, naturally, I think we are averse to change and we prefer things to be drip fed to us. So is it really a terrible thing that there is a slow move towards kind of greater digitization? Or do you think that this is we're missing opportunities to move faster and go further?
Look, I think slow or fast, I think one of the things that digitization is creating is this socio-economic divide, if you want to say. The older generation are not fully understanding the impact of digitization to their world, the way that they have lived post-war. And it's not easy for them to change, nor do they want to change somewhat. There will be groups of people who can, but the digital world is sort of leaving them behind a little bit. So how do you bring them into that circle of digital world? How do you then share this information so that they get the right outcomes as well, and that they have the right benefits for them, right? So hence, I think that's a challenge. I don't think the digital world really thinks about that social economic divide as such. I think that's a missed opportunity. There's a whole set of group of people that you potentially were the baby boomers, if not, who has that spend power somewhat, and you're missing them out to some extent. Not all of them, but some of the older ones, you're really missing them out. So that's that opportunity that is missed, I feel. But look, in the sense, digitization is good. It's the way, it's inevitable. It's the way it's going. You're not going to stop it. It's the way the world is going to work, and that it's progress. It's creating more efficient society, but as part of it, I think it requires a lot more upskilling, getting the right talent into place, and not, saying there's a real competing platform in the world for talent at this moment. Every industry is struggling to have people in STEM, and it is the STEM people that you really need. You need the artists, and you need all of them as part of the digital world. But to get this technology up and running and not leave behind, you need the combination of all of this talent to work together. And I think that EQ part is really going to be important in this digital environment if we're going to succeed in bringing everybody together in that journey. So that is my personal thoughts in this, as such that it needs also protecting and not abusing the data as such, and that making sure that the world of social media and that impact and what that can do to those who don't want their data to be shared, how does that work in this future world? So these are conundrums, these are challenges that I think we'll face, and I'm sure as we progress, hopefully we'll find the right solutions that then brings inclusivity into a disconnected world.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm a huge fan of the concept of smart cities, so long as they're, developed, considering some ethical principles as well. And you know, I'm very active as part of the Red Foundation Data Ethics Steering Committee, really trying to imagine what greater volumes of data being used for the public good should look like, or how it should be treated to take people on that journey. But ultimately, this is about people, right? It's about citizens, and it's about how we live our day-to-day lives. And it's about, protecting the essence of humanity, but also making sure that we're using our tools and technologies for the greater good to limit our impact on the environment and amongst other things, as well as making our lives a lot easier, right? No one wants to wash clothes by hand anymore once you've got a washing machine. Life is just a lot easier. Um, but one of the things that kind of I can't ignore is also in that mindfulness element is considering some of the challenges that come along with digitization. So we've talked a little bit about culture. We've touched on, some technical issues around connectivity and technology availability, etc. I guess the other one, which is a really big issue as well, is security and cybersecurity. I know we touched on it a little bit, but this is one I think that probably concerns me more than anything, which is people are resourceful and they come up with many, they're very creative when it is not for the so good.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of thoughts as well from your perspective in terms of how to put in place the right level of protections, especially for some of these, public structures that are being developed, smart public structures.
Yeah, you certainly don't want somebody hacking into that sort of machine learning algorithm in a lift and suddenly have a joyride and have fun. Certainly, So uh, must say that we had to put 4 levels of secure gates to prevent anybody hacking into our system. So we were quite concerned about the cybersecurity requirements. So I think this is going to be a ever challenging environment, creating the right secure environment for people to trust that the technology is going to protect them. There's going to be a real trust element in this. If we got an autonomous vehicle and autonomous traffic lights, you want to make sure that it's going to protect them. Right? And so what level of security, and you're right, you mentioned this group of people are really, really smart. And so I really, can't think of what type of secure system in the future may need to come in, because it probably needs to be some sort of artificial intelligence system that's doing its own, it's already there anyway, that's working on itself and, countering all these hacks on a daily or minutes, hourly basis as such. So, but all this requires massive amount of investment, amount of data, large storage devices. So that's all going to be a challenging environment. So I really don't know what's the answer to it, to be honest. Where we're going to end up and how we're going to make sure that the data is fully protected and that the infrastructure that it belongs to is going to be looked after. But certainly it's a challenge that we need to be cognizant of and put the right systems in place to protect the communities and the people who use it.
Yeah, it's what's life without a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, yesterday I was having a conversation with someone who talked to me about, maintaining control over the algorithms and how they're operating, right? It's an external facing, but also an internal facing challenge to um, kind of manage the benefits of some of these activities and technologies. So yes. So finally, my last question for you, Gandhi. So thank you for this conversation, but I guess it's more of an open one. What's next? So how do you see, this evolving? Do you see, future technologies coming into play? Do you see technology, some of the ideas that I've heard previously is technology becoming less important, the experience becoming more kind of in front and center of some of the way that we design, and we just take for granted the fact that technology is going to enable all of this stuff. Um, are we all going to live on the metaverse? And this is obviously my favorite, comment ever. But what does it actually look like in terms of, where we go from here or in the future?
Look, with this evolution of where we are in 5G and the IR 4.0, Industrial Revolution 4.0, I think we're going to see significant impacts to how we manage people's expectations and experience. I think you are right. Experience, people are looking out for experience. How can we use then this digital world to give them some of these experiences? The use of augmented reality, for example, can provide certain level of experience. Augmented reality also can solve some of the issues that people face in terms of, whether it's blindness, hearing issues. So as technology evolves, I think we're going to solve some of the fundamental issues of access to certain groups of people. And I think I'm excited to see that side of things happen because that opens up, a whole new world for them. But at the same time, it's there are limitations in all of this. The rise of quantum computing, the rise of need for more cloud computing, more data, more energy will create that next level of challenge that we need to be managed. And so, how does that then impact in the environment? And for me, if there's a greater good that we should do with technology is to protect this environment and protect this planet A. There's no planet B, right? So that's my next part of looking at possibility of using technology in decarbonization or helping in decarbonization. How do we use technology in the right way and look at how do we reduce the impact on this planet? That's the next level of work that I'm really working on at this point.
And I think that's a good place to end is how do we use technology for the benefit of humanity and the benefit of our planet, right? It's a really honorable, goal to have. So, and we should all be thinking in that way, I'd say. Um, so on that note, I think all I've got left to say is thank you, Gandhi, for spending this time with me and sharing some of your perspectives as well as some of the work that you're doing. And yeah, I'm excited to keep having more of these conversations and see how the world evolves.
Thank you very much, and yeah, and happy to share my knowledge and experience with yourself.
Thank you.